Most of us think our MIG welds on our cars are good enough. But when you start chasing that really nice finish, chasing warpage, you start researching, you end up at TIG welding. You realize very quickly that TIG welding is a whole different animal. So the problem is, majority of people say it's too expensive or it's too hard to learn. So what we did was we went down and we bought the cheapest TIG welder off of Amazon that we could find for $192. In this series, our goal is to show you guys what comes with this YesWelder, how to set it up, and step-by-step things to practice to make you guys a professional in your garage. Let's open this thing up. Expectations are pretty low for $192, and we don't even really know what's inside and if we have everything, so I'm excited to see what you get for $192. Wow, not much. It's a cute little sucker. It's like a plasma cutter size. And it doesn't take up a bunch of room like our Miller. But it does have a 220 plug. And I believe this is a 220 or 110 power. I picked this one specifically because I wanted to make sure you guys at home, if you're just in your garage, you can still operate this. Now, obviously, you're not going to be trying to weld chassis together with this thing. This video is strictly to get guys that are wanting to do sheet metal welding up and running for a very affordable price. So that way you can practice. If you guys are looking for more demonstrations or in-person classes, we do have in-person classes here at the shop at sylvesterscustoms.com. We also do a lot of high-end restoration work. So if it's something you guys have any interest, feel free to shoot us an email through the website. This is the ground clamp. We have a ground clamp that's going to be plugging into the front of this machine. This will likely be our gas hose for our argon. On a MIG welder, you typically have an argon mix. TIG welders are going to be taking straight argon. Apparently this thing does stick welding. I didn't know that either. I don't even know how to stick weld. Maybe we practice with this guy. That's your clamp for holding the stick welder. And here is the stuff we're looking for. We want the TIG welding options. Check that out. This is our plug adapter like you would have typically in your, say you're going to charge your RV. This plug will go in and go directly to our 110 power. And because our goal of this video is to show you guys at home how to weld in your garage, we're going to start out with 110 power the whole time. The thought there is 110 should suffice enough amperage because when you're TIG welding sheet metal, it doesn't require a bunch of amperage. If you guys are asking yourself, why do I even need to try TIG welding? You've probably tried to metal finish out a MIG weld, and the problem with MIG welds is they're a lot harder. Sure, they get good penetration, but a majority of people that do sheet metal work, they MIG weld a panel up, and then they end up with all this warpage that you can't reverse easily. And we want to break this down into a series for you guys. This is just number one of like 5 videos. In these next 5 videos that we're going to be putting out, we're going to break down what do you start with to learn the techniques and muscle memory to hold a TIG torch and create a puddle. What metal do you use? What tungsten do you use? We're going to go through all that stuff, how to set this machine up, and then break it down in understanding the metallurgy side of what happens to the sheet metal when the arc strikes, as well as how to remove all the warpage back to a mere finish when you're done, even with this cheap welder. We have everything laid out on the table, and we want to just start hooking things up and showing you what you need outside of what it comes with. We have our torch, our ground clamp, our torch collet, the collet body, all those pieces that are going to go into the head. But the things that do not come with this welder is going to be a regulator. It comes with the hose for the regulator, but you guys will need to get a regulator. You can typically find those somewhere around 70 bucks on Amazon. If you have not checked, we're going to have links to some of the stuff that we have here in the description of this video. However, you are going to need to buy tungsten. For what we're going to be using, we're going to be using 1/16 2% serrated, that is the gray tungsten, as well as some 18 gauge scrap cold rolled sheet metal that you're going to be practicing with. And lastly, a ER70S2 filler rod that is 0.45 thousandths. So once we have all of those pieces, you can then begin to set this welder up. We're going to start with hooking up the ground clamp. On the front of the machine, if you're looking at it to the far left, we are going to be hooking our ground plug into the positive connector, turning it clockwise. From there, we are going to be connecting the torch. Do not be using a thread sealant of any kind or the tape for sealing. This is not a pipe thread. This is a actual tapered fitting that seals off with nothing needed. Just thread it in by hand. The wiring has a little detent that you just need to locate. There we go. Once you find the detent, press it in firmly, maybe. And then thread in the ring after you have it seated. As far as the wiring up in the front of the machine, that is all you need to do. From there, we have our gas line that is coming out of the back of the welding machine. It is hooked directly into our regulator, which is going into the argon bottle. You need to source yourself an argon bottle. I recommend going on Marketplace or Craigslist and finding a used bottle, because you can get them as cheap as 50 bucks if you wait for the right person. And then you can take that old tank into any supply store and they will just swap the tank out, and then you have an owner tank instead of a rental tank for a fraction of the price. Otherwise, you might be paying as high as $400, $450 for the bottle, and then you have to pay for the gas. At least at this point, they're swapping a bottle. Even if it's not up to date with its certifications, they will basically just swap it out and recertify that old tank. From there, we're going to be turning on our argon, and we are going to be looking to make sure that the gauge on the right is reading how much argon you have in the tank. The gauge on the left is going to be your CFH. That is cubic feet per hour, and that needs to be somewhere around the 15 to 20 range. Me personally, I always have it typically set on 20 for a standard collet body, not a gas lens. Now, if you had a gas lens, that may require more CFH to have enough gas flow to cover the weld pool. When we're going through, this welder is super sensitive to voltages. So we are going to be starting out this with 110 volts. This welder will work on 110 volts as well as 220 volts. It's a little more temperamental, but just things to think about. You need to have a good ground nice, and this thing secured on there, as well as a good power supply. I do not recommend running an extension cord for a long distance. You're gonna lose a lot of the current drop in that. So put it close to your plug, get your workplace set up, get everything out that you need, and then let's start assembling the torch. We are going to be setting up the torch head with this. First piece is going to be the collet body. The collet body just threads into the bottom of the torch head. Then we are going to be putting the cup. We're going to be using the number 6 cup. This comes with a 4, a 5, and a number 6. The only difference in the cups is the diameter of the cup. Outside of that, we are going to take the collet body. We are going to be setting this up for 1/16 tungsten. We have already ground our tungsten ends, inserting it into the larger end first, and the tapered end is towards the bottom, which will then stick out the end of the torch. Once we insert that, we are going to grab the end cap and then thread it in, and that is going to tighten down on the collet into the collet body, securing the tungsten. Before you tighten it all the way, you can move the tungsten in or out to get the desired stick out. The stick out should technically be half of the distance, so the radius of the diameter of the cup at the end. So obviously with a smaller cup, maybe a number 4, it's not as big around. You cannot stick the tungsten out as far. That is the advantage of buying a gas lens, is more gas flow means you can stick the tungsten out farther to get down into tighter areas. That is all that is needed to get the torch set up and ready to weld. Some of the protective equipment that you're gonna need is either a long sleeve shirt and or a welding jacket. Typically that is not going to be for any sparks. There's no sparks when you're TIG welding. It is just to cover from getting flash burn on your skin. You are going to need some TIG gloves. I really like the Black Stallion gloves. These are the T50s. They're probably the most comfortable once you get broken in. You just have to get the right size for your hand. And then you're going to need a welding hood. Now, not everybody wants to buy a Miller T94. They're extremely expensive, but this is something that we do every day. So figure out what welding helmet works for you. I personally like auto darkening, so I'm not having to constantly open and close the helmet so I can see where my positions are. It's just nice to have, but it's not a necessity. Another thing that we have that we can put in the link is we use these little lights that we get off Amazon that are rechargeable. We stick them on the helmet. It's nice because you can point them exactly where you want to be. Maybe you're down in the footwell of a car body and it's hard to see. All things are just useful little tips to help you practice the very beginning steps in doing the TIG welding process. Let's fire this thing up. So power switch is on the back. Once you fire it up, it will show you what voltage you are plugged into. In this case, we're plugged into 110 volts. And we want to set up the TIG welder to be optimal for the 18 gauge cold rolled steel that we're gonna have you guys practice throughout this series. This series is just designed to get you guys up and welding and playing with your welder to kind of understand how things are going to work. But this is going to be one of 5 videos where we take you all the way through, step by step, everything that you need to gain the muscle memory and technique to be proficient and professional in your weld jobs. If you guys want a more one-on-one experience with understanding all of the details of this, we do also hold classes here at the shop. Just look up sylvesterscustoms.com for more information. But let's get into it. When you're looking at the screen of the machine, you're going to notice that it has a stick feature for stick welding. It's going to have a HF TIG, which is a high frequency TIG, as well as a pulse TIG. There's a bunch of other settings about the wavelengths and pre-flow and post-flow for the gas, but we don't really want to get into that for this particular video. We just want to get you guys started and get you off to the races. The critical thing is the amperage that you're going to run the TIG welder. Maybe you're using this welder, maybe you're using another welder in your shop or garage. We need to match the thickness of the metal. In order to do so, we're going to be using dial calipers. These are measuring thousandths. So we're going to take a measurement off of our 18 gauge steel, which is 43 thousandths of an inch. So if we know we have 43 on our metal, we want to be correlating that with 43, 45 amps. They need to be the same, so that way the input heat is melting at the right time and it's not overcooking the metal. Meaning if you don't have enough amperage here, you're going to be staying in one spot too long. If you think about a TIG torch as a normal torch that you would have with a oxygen settling tank, if you stay in one spot too long, you just heat up a panel and cook it. We want to be setting everything up to be optimal to start working through a panel, and that's why we're showing you these basics so you guys can practice on how to become proficient. The other thing that we're going to be doing is matching our filler rod. So our filler rod is the ER70S2. This is what you're going to be typically using for cold rolled mild steel. We are also going to be picking 45 thousandths for the beginning demonstrations of this video. Now we're going to be utilizing different thickness filler rod for different circumstances in later videos. But to practice, 45 thou tends to be easier to learn how to feed the rod, and we're going to get into those demonstrations later. As far as the settings on the machine, you're changing the amperage with the dial in the upper right hand corner. Outside of that, we're going to leave all of the settings on the least amount. So when you toggle through from left to right, there is pre-flow and post-flow settings. That is just how much the gas is flowing before the torch actually arcs, and after you have stopped the arc, how long the gas continues to flow. That is about the only setting that I would suggest setting up. When you go to the arrows, you have a left arrow or a right arrow on either side of the machine. It's just to toggle one way or the other back and forth. If we go over to the post gas, set that at about 1.0 to begin. Outside of that, all of the other settings are going to be on the minimum settings that the machine comes with. In the upper right hand corner, you'll have a 2T and a 4T. The 2T setting is for the TIG torch. Now there is a button that you have to depress, and when you push it and hold it, that is for the 2T setting. When you hold it down, you are on continuously the whole time. Now, it's typically going to be used for smaller stitch welds, and if you want to do a longer continuous weld across an entire panel and you want to hold the torch and not focus on the switch, you can select the 4T button, and then when you click the switch, it will power on and remain on until you click the button again to shut it off. The upper left button, you'll notice it has weld mode. That is very simply 3 options. Just go through from stick, TIG, or pulse settings. In this case, we are going to be just sticking with the high frequency TIG. We're not going to get into pulse sections at this time, and we're definitely not going to be doing any stick welding for high quality sheet metal work. That's pretty much the basics of this machine. I'm eager to get this thing fired up and see how it actually works or doesn't work. So we're going to glove up, put our helmet on, hook up our ground clamp, and see what it can do. Not too bad. Definitely shocking. It's really hard to beat that you can get a decent TIG weld out of a $192 TIG machine. Now I want to be as transparent as absolute possible with this machine. We bought this machine personally. This was not something that was given to us from YesWelder. The reason that we chose this machine was because every time I have somebody come into a class, one of the questions that they ask is, what is this going to cost me to get into TIG welding and start practicing? So all we did was go on Amazon and pick literally the cheapest welder that I could find to do this work, to be able to show you guys what's needed to at least get off the ground and started practicing. For $192, the fact that you can go up as high as, I believe it's 160 amps on this machine. Now that we've messed with it for a few minutes, we do see a couple things with the 110 volt versus 220 volt. It still works on 110 volt. You just might have to crank it up a little bit more. Little tiny caveats like that, but overall, for the price, it's pretty hard to beat. If you guys are chasing better welds and trying to come up with a procedure, please like, subscribe to the channel for future videos for this series where we see what this little $192 machine can actually do.